name is Don Marshall. I have been singing calypsos under the name Sir Don for almost all of my life. I say almost all of my life because I was born to a Trinidad father. As a matter of fact, my parents on my father's side are all Trinidadians. And I grew up as a child singing calypsos, hearing calypsos. So it's almost in my genes. I have won 4 calypso crowns in Barbados over the years, with the first being in 1963 and the last being in 1975 when I wrote 2 songs. The names slip me right now, but it'll come back to me, I'm sure. Between 1975 and now, I have written several calypsos for several calypsonians in Barbados. Blood, Colin Spencer, Ian Webster, Crystal Cummings Beckles, Sheldon Hope, quite a number of people. Some of the names slip me right now. I would like to say though that I stopped singing in 1981 at the request of my mother. My mother really never liked me singing calypso because my father, Trinidadian though he was, disappeared when I was 7 years, and that left a bit of taste in my mother's mouth. She never liked me singing calypso. So all the singing that I have done and traveling all over the world, 13 major cities in Europe in 1975 and all the records and so on, it never made any difference to her. So in 1981, I decided to stop singing calypsos at the request of my mother. But I didn't promise her that I would stop writing. And although I stopped actually singing in 81, I've been writing from then until now. As a matter of fact, this being what, the 11th of September 2015, I am still writing songs for next year because it just comes. It comes. I don't decide when I'm going to write. Some people may be ashamed to admit this, but even when I'm in church, because I'm a avid church goer, sometimes the idea comes right there and then. But I would like to say too that I have never written any song in my life that I could not sing in church. I don't write suggestive songs, I don't write vulgar songs. It's just a personal choice. I prefer to write songs that are intelligent and that people can relate to and so on, as opposed to suggestive or vulgar.
Right, so Don, how does folk music contribute to the sound of Caribbean music, in your opinion, in general?
Well, in my opinion, folk music, by the name alone, speaks to the heart and the culture of Caribbean people. Folk music, in my view, expresses the pain, the agony, where we come from, the history of music, and it's an indication of the transition from many years ago to where we are now. So you need to hear folk coming out of the heart of West Indian people.
Is there such a thing as Bajan calypso or soca?
No, I would say not, because I remember the actual name. I know where the name soca come from. I remember when Calypsonian Trinidad, what was his name again? The name slipped me.
Shorty Eye.
Shorty Eye blended soul with soca, hence soca, and I don't know that that's the case at all.
Who are the earliest tents that laid the foundation for calypso and soca in Barbados, in your opinion?
In my view, the earliest tents would have been Battleground, of course. The name of Warnock was very popular. Conqueror's Calypso tent. Who else? Huh? There was the one in another one in St. Philip. The name slips me now, but I could think of Battleground and Conquerors and All Stars. Those would be the earlier tents. Some of the several earlier tents in my view.
Did the Yoruba house play any part in the development of a local style calypso, in your opinion?
Very much so. Yoruba house, thanks to Elton Morley, came to our rescue I say we because I'm a founder member of Battleground Calypso 10, and we opened in 1980 in Yoruba Yard, thanks to Elton. And a whole lot of popular Calypsonians now would have had their genesis in Yoruba Yard under management of Elton Motley and under the leadership of the mighty Gabby and myself and Viper and Romeo in those days, to name a few.
Are you aware of any phrasing or interpretation issues when comparing Barbados style calypso or soca with Trinidad, Guyana, or any other island?
Very, very much so. In our speech alone, Barbadians, it differs significantly from the names you just mentioned, Trinidad, Grenada, Guyana, St. Lucia, all the other islands have the same sort of sing-song tone in their speech. But Barbadians are unique in my view.
Would all Caribbean islands play a particular soca or calypso song with the same feel, or what do you attribute this difference to in feel and interpretation?
I would attribute that to the genes. When you hear the musicality coming out of Trinidad, for instance, it differs significantly from that in Barbados. And I believe it is in their genes. From the time when they were children, school children, as you know, in Trinidad, come up and they hear music and they play music and they sing music. But a lot of school children, it's beginning to happen now in Barbados, but a lot of school children are not exposed to that type of environment. Hence, we in Barbados differ initially from the Trinidad and the Grenada and the other Caribbean islands' influence.
In the early 80s, a number of Calypsonians flew to Trinidad to get the music arranged and produced and recorded and so on. What do you think that, what caused that?
Well, that was, you see, with Trinidad undisputedly being the land of Calypso, that was to get into Trinidad. If you sung like a Trinidadian, even in your lyrics and your music, as long as you sung, because Trinidad didn't like themselves, and you can't blame them. And if you sung like a Trinidadian, then I think you stand a better chance of getting your music played down there. In my view, I could think of Books and Hit It and Saucy and even this guy that dances the foot thing, the chip fella, Holy Bam Bam. Even now, after all these years, Holy Bam Bam is still being played in Trinidad because of the sort of influence that it has.
So what role did Eddie Grant play in the whole mix of calypso and soca, especially in the 80s, in your opinion?
Eddie, in my view, transformed the whole sound of calypso in Barbados. I've had the pleasure of being in the studio for several years while Gabby and Griner were recording, and his ear is exceptional, and I think we in Barbados owe a lot to Gabby because that's, you can't dispute it. It's because of Eddie Grant that Griner has been recognized, and many of Gabby's songs hadn't been recognized. If it weren't for Eddie, I don't know that they would have gotten the exposure that they got back in the 80s and up to now.
This is a question a little bit outside of the box, not flowing with the other questions, but why do you think Barbados has not been able to develop any other genre besides spooge, which has not even been readily accepted by their own people?
I think that we concentrate too much on copying. We like to play other people's. We like to sing. I don't want to call names now, but there are some reggae singers in Barbados now that want to sing better than Bob Marley and Bunny Wailer. They want to be somebody else as opposed to concentrating outside of spooge on some indigenous song of our own. We like to ride on the wave of what's happening, in the other islands.
Another question slightly out of the box. Do you think class, race, and status have any bearing on music creation and development in small island states like Barbados?
Um, yeah, I think so.
School and so on.
I think so. Um, Even now, a lot of music. If certain bands of a certain class
Right.
were to have a show tomorrow in Barbados, the response would be tremendous. So there is still some percentage of class there as opposed to the other bands, in my view. I don't think they can get away from it. It's a fact of
Just
life.
exists.
It just exists.
Do you support the notion that the islands of the region are similar yet uniquely different?
But yes, we are too small and too near not to be similar. But even in our foods and stuff like that, it's similar but different. You get doubles, and you get roti, and we have our own breadfruit cocoa and so on. So we are too close not to be dissimilar. Although we try to think about independence and stuff like that, but we are as a matter of fact, in my view, I remember some years ago hearing a calypso called the United States of the Caribbean that was never recorded, but that's who we are, United States of the Caribbean.
Right. Would you agree that raga soca is uniquely Barbadian, or is this just a false notion, a false claim?
Um, I think it's a false name. I don't think it's uniquely Barbadian at all.
Yeah.
Sorry to say that, but I don't think it's uniquely Barbadian.
You want to just expound on it a little bit?
Well, it is not ours. We got on the bandwagon, and we develop it, and we add in some little spice and sugar and clove and stuff like that in order to try to give it a little flavor. But it is not ours.
What role do arrangers and producers play in the development of calypso and soca music, and particularly Bajan style calypso and soca?
Arrangers are the heart and soul of calypso music in my view. I have had the pleasure of working years ago in the early 80s with Phil Brito at Trinidadian, and I wrote a number of songs. And there were some times in the studio when I hear the music that he arranged, that while I was singing, it put me out. I mean, I got listening. I wrote the song, but the arrangement was something that I had no dealings with at all. So, and he is responsible for having done that. Arrangers are the heart and soul of any good calypso, in my view.
And that brings me to what role and did technology play in the operation or the creation of newer Bajan artists like Lead Pipe and Sadis and so on?
Well, technology nowadays watered down the whole thing. In my view, they're using electronic. All you need is a computer and a room
Keyboard.
and a keyboard and stuff like that, and you go down the road and stuff like that. But if you were to hear, take the festival orchestra for that matter. I mean, when the festival band plays the calypso, you wonder if the same calypso that you've been hearing in the tents and on the radio all along. It just shows you how the human element is right in the recording is missing.
What is your perception of modern music arrangers and producers, engineers, from a technological perspective? Close to what you just said just now, but focusing now on the role of the modern, because you know everybody's a producer now. Years ago when we talked about arranger, we talked about classical arranger, that people could write out the music and score it and so on. Now arranger now is anybody goes in the studio now and does a recording. He calls himself a arranger, a producer, an engineer, and everything in one. You think that is?
A producer and an engineer are miles apart in my mind. A producer, an engineer deals with the technical aspect, in my mind, of the recording, while a producer concentrates entirely on a different concept. uh, totally.
What role do radio DJs play in the development or undermining of soca music in Barbados and the Caribbean?
Boys, they're the heart and soul of it. Huh? If a DJ likes a musical piece that he's hearing, he is going to play it as often as he can, expose it as much as he can, and stuff like that. So we are really dependent upon DJs and radio personalities to promote uh, the music. For whatever reason, though, very often they tend to give more exposure to foreign stuff than our local stuff.
Let's talk now about young artists. Why do most young artists shy away from traditional calypso, in your opinion?
They they have found traditional calypso more difficult to perfect. The content of traditional stuff is too elevated for them in their mind, and they can just use 5 and 10 words in the other sort of party music and down the road. It calls for thought, it calls for development of theme, it calls for certain vocal inflections and stuff like that. It is not as easy to perfect as what we call party music.
Let's look at East Indians, because I know East Indians have been marginalized by Brathwaite and other writers in terms of creolity and so on. So we're looking now at what role do they play, these are the East Indians, in calypso or soca music.
Well, they are coming into their own now, although in Trinidad there are several and many East Indians who made some very popular and long-lasting songs. But I think that they are now coming on board. They're not quite there as yet. In a simple explanation.
All right. In a seminar last year, chalk dust was brought in. Chalk dust was brought in to deal with some issues relating to CXCs and so on. And in that interview, he talked about Marshall Montana. And while not going into details of what he alluded to, I'm going to ask a question that will bounce off of that interview, which is, what is Marshall Montana's dilemma from a musical versus financial perspective? If any.
I like if any.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. In my view, Marshall is into production and productivity and volume. And all right now, I'm sure that he would have almost finished what he is going to deliver next year from a marketing standpoint, in my view.
Okay. Do you see a disconnect between the 80s calypso and soca music and current calypso and soca music? And to what do you attribute this disconnect? Older people can't seem to connect with the more modern sounds and believe that the older music was far superior to what's happening now, and the younger generation is saying that music outdated, gone, calypso is outdated. What's your opinion on that?
I don't know. I don't know that I agree with it being outdated, because when you listen to the older music, when the different disc jockeys on the radio playing the older music, you just can't get enough. It's entirely a different feel, a different sound nowadays from yesteryear, in my view. When I listen, if I might be so bold as to some of my music from way back then, I am pleased with how refreshing it sounds because of the amount of musical ingredients that went into it back in those days.
So a lot of the music you're saying then may have been taken out of the modern thing, or it's just a new phase? It's just a evolution. How
A
do you see
a
it?
lot of the music has been taken out of the today's music. It doesn't have enough musicality in today's music, in my view.
What about melody and so on?
Um, Melody, a lot of melodies too are repetitive. Huh? I say that because of my involvement in calypso all these years. I can listen to so many songs that are so similar in so the melodies to so many other songs, and that's because I have studied this thing all of my life. Studied it from the point of view of listening and writing and being involved.
So you think, in terms of storyline and melody and so on, that is something, there's a void somewhere in there?
Yes, I think that the creativity, the creativity is missing as it relates to lyrics for that matter. I've written some songs on some subject. I wrote a song for Crystal Cummings Beckles a few years ago. I think she came forth with it called Ants. I mean, who writes a song about ants? And when I told her I had this song for her, she asked me what was the name of it. I said, I'm not telling you what the name of it is because you don't like it. But then when she heard it, she went wild and she came forth with ants. And that, I think, is the Trinidadian in me looking for a topic outside of the box, as they say, in order to excite the ear, if you're with me.
Yeah. How do the earlier times of carnival in Barbados differ from what we call crop over now? Or is it becoming more of a carnival now?
It is becoming more of a carnival now because back in the 80s, I think even the 60s, when there was carnival in 1965 and 64, we had in Barbados something called Summer Festival. They tried carnival on 64, and then in 65 they changed the name to Summer Festival, but it was still a spin-off of the bees and feathers and flags and stuff of Trinidad. It's just a few steps down from Trinidad Carnival. The same sort of concept.
Is there a definitive way of phrasing calypso and soca music from other genres like R&B and reggae?
Definitely so. The phrasing of calypso, as a matter of fact, when it comes to R&B and so, you don't have to rhyme. You can read it like a whole poem, and there's no need to rhyme. And sometimes too, it doesn't have to make a whole lot of sense. I could think of Alone Again naturally. In a little while from now, feeling that sorrow. If you were to listen to the words of Alone Again naturally and A Whiter Shade of Pale, I mean, and compare that to a calypso, it just couldn't work. So you get away with that sort of thing in the other indigenous music, but it is harder on calypsonians because you have to rhyme. Whether you rhyme in the middle, you don't have to rhyme. It doesn't have to be a nursery rhyme, and you rhyme box on cocks and locks. You could rhyme inside, you rhyme outside, and many times they are unrhymed lines, which makes it difficult, in delivery if you don't know really what you're doing.
So, interviewing a Trinidadian recently, he's suggesting that these days you can sing blues on top of soca beat, you can sing jazz on top of soca beat. That's the new thing happening. He said that that's the old way. This is the new way to mix different genres to come up with something that is marketable outside. What's your feeling on that?
Yes, I agree 100%. I know of several pop songs that are being played at fetes and stuff like that in the soca beat idiom. So what he's saying is definitely so. You don't have to. I don't want to name names, but I know right now of a very popular song that has been given the soca flavor, but I don't want to identify it for obvious reasons. But yes.
But the phrasing should be different, or
Well, the phrasing has, if you're going to take it from pop into calypso, you have to phrase it different. You just can't play it the same way. It has to have different phrasing entirely. You have to put your own stamp on it, if you like.
Okay, final question. Do you see any negative impact, read influx of Trinidadians writing for Bajan artists from an identity perspective?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. Not at all. First, it is what you want. If I were going to sing again, which I doubt, and a Trinidadian Calypsonian came, a Trinidadian writer came to me, it would have to be something that sounds as though it came from me. In other words, I would not be just a carbon copy. And apart from that, you must remember that that what's her name is the girl who did Kim. We've had
TC.
We've had TC in Trinidad. We've had Gabby in Trinidad, and I don't see anything wrong with it. Not really. Not if that's what you want.
Right.
If we are one people as we say we are, and we want to, you know.
But if we are looking at identity, because of slavery and so on, where different slaves would have deposited different traits in different islands, and that's what makes each island stand out, and different accents and so on. If a Trinidadian writes for a Barbadian, and he brings his lingual, his way of speaking, and deposit it on the Barbadian singer, don't you think that would be changing the identity of the Bajan singer?
Yes, I think so. But as I mentioned earlier, that is because the Bajan singer is concentrating primarily on the Trinidadian market. And if the Trinidadian writes a song, since we are who we are going to play. Since the Trinidadian writes the song, it will get a whole lot of exposure down in Trinidad. You see, the whole thing is about the Trinidad thing is to get in Trinidad, you know, and to get on Eastern Parkway, you know, and to get in Notting Hill, you know, and to get in this place and so on, so on, so. It is primarily for to get overseas. Now, I don't think that you will find in the near future a Trinidadian writing a social commentary on Barbadian points of views. They don't know sufficient about us to write. Frondel, can you imagine a Trinidadian writing a song named Frondel? He doesn't know enough about the subject. But he write about beads. Trinidadian write a song called Beads and Feathers. Beads and feathers and stuff, and exposure of bands and stuff like that in his Trinidadian mentality. But you wouldn't find a Trinidadian writing a social commentary on Barbadian, you know, on Barbadian matters.
So then, marketing then overrides identity then?
Very much so. Very much so. It is purely marketing.
All right, thank you, Sudan.
You are very welcome. It was a pleasure. I hope something that I said made sense. At least something.
All right, thank you.